The bruise on Rose Miller's cheekbone had turned a deep purple by the time she stumbled into the general store in Palisade, Colorado, her hands trembling as she clutched 3 pennies that represented the last of what little money she had hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her uncle's barn. She had given him the wrong answer about when the cattle buyer was supposed to arrive, and Benjamin Miller had made certain she understood the price of such mistakes with the back of his calloused hand across her face, followed by his boot when she had fallen to the ground. The year was 1882, and women had precious few places to turn when family became the enemy, especially out here in the unforgiving landscape of western Colorado, where the mesas stretched endlessly toward a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at during the long summer days. Rose was 20 years old, though she often felt decades older from the weight of survival that had pressed down on her shoulders ever since her parents died from scarlet fever 3 years prior. Her uncle had taken her in with what seemed like reluctance, and over time that reluctance had curdled into something meaner, something that turned violent whenever she failed to anticipate his needs or gave an answer he deemed incorrect. She had learned to make herself small, to speak softly, to always try to provide the response he wanted rather than the truth. But sometimes she simply could not read his mind. And then the punishments came swift and brutal. The general store smelled of tobacco, leather, and the faint sweetness of peppermint candies kept in a jar by the register. Rose kept her head down as she approached the counter, her long dark hair falling forward to hide the evidence of her uncle's rage. She had come for Thread to mend his shirts because he had barked at her that morning about the torn sleeve on his work shirt, threatening worse than what she had already endured if it was not fixed by supper time. "Help you, miss?" The store owner, an elderly man named Mr. Perkins, peered at her over his spectacles with rheumy eyes that had seen too much of life's cruelties to be easily shocked. "Just thread, please," Rose whispered, placing her pennies on the scarred wooden counter. "Brown thread if you have it." Mr. Perkins nodded slowly, reaching for a spool behind him. But before he could complete the transaction, the door swung open with enough force to make the bell above it clang loudly. Rose flinched instinctively, her body already preparing for another blow, but when she dared to glance toward the entrance, she saw it was not her uncle but a tall cowboy with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of aged whiskey. He wore dusty chaps over worn denim, a brown leather vest over a faded blue shirt, and a black hat that had seen better days but was cared for nonetheless. "Afternoon, Mr. Perkins, why," the cowboy said, his voice a low rumble that somehow managed to sound both authoritative and gentle at the same time. "I need to pick up that order of rope and the new bridle if it came in on the freight wagon." "Sure thing, Austin," Mr. Perkins replied, and Rose caught the name, filing it away automatically the way she filed away all information that might prove useful for survival. "Let me just finish up with Miss Miller here first." Austin Vance had been working on the Double Creek Ranch just outside Palisade for the better part of 2 years, ever since he had drifted into Colorado from Montana looking for honest work and a place where his past would not matter as much as his willingness to put in a hard day's labor. He was 24 years old and had learned the cowboy's trade from his father before consumption had taken both his parents within a year of each other. He had been alone ever since, moving from ranch to ranch, never staying long enough to put down roots, but always doing his job well enough that foremen were sorry to see him go. When he glanced at the young woman standing at the counter, something made him look twice. Perhaps it was the way she held herself, hunched and protective, as if expecting an attack. Or perhaps it was the glimpse of that purple bruise he caught when her hair shifted. Austin had seen enough violence in his life to recognize its aftermath, and something in his chest tightened with anger at whoever had put their hands on this woman in such a brutal fashion. Rose took her thread with a murmured thanks and turned to leave, but her uncle's voice calling her name from outside made her freeze in place, her face going pale beneath the bruise. Through the window, Austin could see a thick-set man with a cruel mouth and mean eyes standing beside a wagon, his posture radiating impatience and anger. "I asked you a simple question, girl," Benjamin Miller shouted, as Rose stepped outside and Austin found himself moving toward the door without conscious thought. "Where is the livestock registry I told you to fetch from the house?" I I thought you said to come directly here after you—" Rose's voice faltered, and Austin watched as she instinctively raised her hands as if to ward off a blow. "You thought wrong," Benjamin snarled, advancing on his niece with his hand already raised. "Just like you gave me the wrong damn day for the cattle buyer, just like you burned the beans last week, just like you—" "Excuse me, sir," Austin said, his voice cutting through Benjamin's tirade as he stepped out onto the wooden boardwalk. His hand rested casually on his belt, not near his gun, but not far from it either, and his posture radiated the kind of quiet confidence that came from a man who knew how to handle himself. "Seems like maybe the lady just got confused. Happens to everyone." Benjamin whirled on him, his face flushing red with fury at the interruption. "This is family business, Cowboy. You would be wise to keep your nose out of it." "Well, I would," Austin replied evenly, his eyes never leaving Benjamin's face. "Except that I am standing right here and cannot help but notice that you seem awfully eager to strike a woman half your size over what sounds like a simple misunderstanding. That does not sit right with me." Rose stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could hear the blood rushing in her ears. No one had ever intervened on her behalf before, not in the 3 years she had lived under her uncle's roof. The other townspeople knew about her situation, she was certain, but in this harsh land people mostly kept to their own business, and a man's treatment of his family was considered his own affair. "Are you calling me out, boy?" Benjamin's hand moved toward the knife at his belt, and Austin's eyes flickered down to note the movement before returning to the older man's face. "I am saying that maybe we all need to take a breath and calm down," Austin said, though his tone had hardened slightly. "The lady made a mistake. She can go fetch whatever you need from the house, and everyone can go about their day without any more trouble. That sound reasonable to you?" For a long moment the tension stretched tight as a wire between the two men. Austin was taller and younger, but Benjamin had the look of a man who fought dirty and would not hesitate to do whatever it took to win. Rose found herself holding her breath, terrified that her uncle would escalate the situation, equally terrified of what would happen to her after the cowboy left, and she was alone with Benjamin again. Finally, Benjamin spat into the dust and jabbed a thick finger toward Rose. "Get home and get that registry, and if you are not back here in 10 minutes, you will regret it." He turned his attention back to Austin, his eyes glittering with malice. "As for you, Cowboy, you just made yourself an enemy. I do not forget slights." "I will try to carry that burden," Austin said dryly, and he watched as Benjamin climbed into his wagon and snapped the reins, sending his horses into a trot down the main street of Palisade. Only when the wagon had disappeared around the corner did Austin turn to Rose, his expression softening. "You all right, miss?" Rose nodded automatically, though nothing could be further from the truth. "I should go," she said quietly. "Thank you but I really should go before he gets angrier." "Hold on," Austin said, and something in his voice made her pause. "That bruise on your face, he do that to you?" She could have lied. She probably should have lied. But there was something in the cowboy's amber eyes that made her tired of pretending, tired of making excuses, just bone-deep weary of living in fear. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I gave him the wrong answer about when the cattle buyer was coming to town. I thought it was Wednesday, but it was Thursday." Austin felt his jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. "He hit you for getting a day wrong?" "He hits me for a lot of things," Rose said, and then seemed shocked that she had spoken the words aloud. She had never told anyone the full truth of her situation, had carried it inside her like a shameful secret, even though the shame belonged to her uncle, not to her. "I am sorry. I should not have said that. Please forget I mentioned anything." "I am not going to forget," Austin said firmly, "and I'm not going to stand by and let a man beat on a woman for making honest mistakes. That is not how things should be." Rose's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back furiously. She could not afford to cry, not here on the street where anyone might see, not when she had to go back to her uncle's house and face whatever punishment awaited her for this delay. "You do not understand," she said. "I have nowhere else to go. My parents are dead. He is my only family. If I leave, I will have nothing and no one." "There are other options," Austin began. but Rose was already shaking her head. "Thank you for your kindness, truly, but I must go." She turned and began walking quickly up the street toward the small homestead her uncle owned on the edge of town, her shoulders rigid with tension. Austin watched her go, his mind working through the problem. He knew the law would not help her. A man was allowed to discipline his household as he saw fit, and unless Benjamin killed her, no sheriff would intervene in what was considered a domestic matter. But Austin's conscience would not let him simply walk away, not after seeing the fear in her eyes and the evidence of violence on her face. He collected his supplies from Mr. Perkins, who gave him a knowing look but said nothing, and then headed back to the Double Creek Ranch where he had a bunkhouse cot and a job that kept him busy from dawn until dusk. But even as he went through the motions of his work that afternoon, checking fence lines and bringing in strays, his thoughts kept returning to Rose Miller and the desperate situation she was trapped in. That evening, as Austin sat outside the bunkhouse with some of the other ranch hands, he brought up the topic carefully. "Any of you know Benjamin Miller? That sour son of a gun who has the small spread east of town?" asked Jake, one of the older cowboys who had been in the area for years. "Yeah, I know him. Mean as a snake and twice as likely to strike at you." "Why?" "Saw him in town today getting ready to hit his niece," Austin said, keeping his voice casual. "Seemed excessive." Jake shook his head grimly. "That girl has had a rough time of it since her folks passed. Word is Miller only took her in because he thought she could work his place for free. He has gotten meaner over the years, especially after his wife left him about 10 years back. No one was surprised when she ran off, though no one knows where she went." "Someone should do something," Austin said, and the other cowboys exchanged glances. "Like what?" another hand named Charlie asked. "The law will not touch a family matter, and if you go after Miller yourself, you will end up on the wrong side of the sheriff for assault or worse. Best to stay out of it, Austin, even though I understand the instinct." But Austin could not stay out of it. The next morning he rode into Palisade on his day off, ostensibly to visit the saloon, but actually hoping to catch sight of Rose, and perhaps find a way to talk to her privately. He found her in the small garden behind her uncle's house, weeding between rows of vegetables with her head down and her movements mechanical. "Miss Miller?" he called softly, not wanting to startle her, but she jumped anyway, whirling around with fear written across her features until she recognized him. "You should not be here," she said urgently, glancing toward the house. "If my uncle sees you—" "Is he home?" "No. He went to look at some horses in the next county over. He will not be back until tomorrow afternoon." Some of the tension eased from her posture. "But still, it is not proper for you to be here." "I know," Austin acknowledged, "but I have been thinking about your situation and I wanted to say something to you." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The way he treats you is not right, Miss Miller. You know that, do not you?" Rose straightened, brushing dirt from her worn skirt. "Of course I know it," she said. And there was a flash of spirit in her voice that made Austin glad to hear it. But knowing something is wrong and being able to change it are two different things entirely. "What if you could change it?" Austin asked. "What if you had somewhere else to go?" "But I do not," Rose said flatly. "I have no money, no skills that anyone would pay me for, no family, except for my uncle. I have thought about running away 100 times, but where would I run to? How would I survive? A woman alone out here." She did not need to finish the sentence. They both knew the dangers that awaited unprotected women in the rough frontier towns. Austin stepped closer, his hat in his hands now, his expression earnest. "What if you were not alone?" Rose's breath caught, and she stared at him with wide eyes. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I have a job, a steady one, and I make decent wages. The ranch where I work, they have been talking about needing someone to help the foreman's wife with cooking and cleaning now that she's getting up in years and struggling with the work. I could speak to them, see if they might be willing to take you on. You would have your own room, your own wages, and you would be away from your uncle." Hope flared in Rose's chest, bright and painful, but she forced herself to be practical. "Your foreman and his wife, they would not want to anger my uncle by hiring me away from his household, And even if they did agree, he would just come and drag me back. He considers me his property. He cannot drag you back if you do not want to go, Austin said firmly. You are 20 years old, an adult. You have the right to choose where you live and work. The law does not always see it that way when it comes to women, Rose pointed out, but her voice held less certainty now. And even if it did, my uncle would make trouble. He would claim I owed him for the years he took care of me, or that I stole from him, or something else to force me back under his control. Austin was quiet for a moment, thinking, what if you were not just working at the ranch? What if you were my wife? The words hung in the air between them, shocking in their directness. Rose felt her face flush hot. You cannot be serious. You do not even know me. We only met yesterday. I know enough, Austin said, and his voice was steady and sure. I know that you are brave because you have survived 3 years of abuse without losing yourself completely. I know that you are kind because when your uncle was yelling at you, you apologized to him even though you had done nothing wrong. I know that you deserve better than what you have, and I know that I cannot stand by and let you continue to suffer when I might be able to help. That is not a reason to get married, Rose protested, even as part of her desperately wanted to say yes to take this chance at escape that had appeared so unexpectedly. Maybe not, Austin agreed, but it is a start, and I will make you a promise right here and now, Rose Miller. If you agree to marry me, I will never raise my hand to you. I will never make you afraid to give me an honest answer. You can speak your mind, you can be wrong, you can make mistakes, and I will not punish you for being human. He paused, and his amber eyes held hers with an intensity that made her heart race. Answer however you want here. No consequences, no judgment. Just your honest truth. Tears spilled down Rose's cheeks, and she did not bother to wipe them away. Why would you do this for a stranger? Because I know what it is like to feel alone in the world, Austin said quietly, and because I believe that when you see someone drowning, you throw them a rope. I am throwing you a rope, Rose. You do not have to take it, but I hope you will. Rose thought about her life with her uncle, the constant fear, the pain, the way she had learned to make herself smaller and quieter in a futile attempt to avoid his rages. She thought about the years stretching ahead of her if she stayed, more of the same, until either he killed her or she lost whatever spark of herself remained. And then she thought about this cowboy who had stood up to her uncle in the middle of the street, who had tracked her down to offer her a way out, who was promising her something she had begun to believe did not exist. Safety. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Austin's face broke into a smile, genuine and warm, and he took a step closer. You will not regret this, Rose. I swear to you. When? She asked, practical concerns already flooding her mind. My uncle returns tomorrow afternoon. If we are going to do this, it has to be soon. Can you be ready to leave by tonight? Austin asked. We can ride to Grand Junction. It is about 20 miles west of here. There is a circuit preacher there who can marry us, and by the time your uncle realizes you are gone and comes looking, you will be my legal wife. He will not be able to claim you back then. Tonight, Rose repeated, her mind reeling. Everything was happening so fast, but she knew that if she hesitated, if she gave herself too much time to think, fear would paralyze her and she would miss this chance. Yes, I can be ready. I do not have much to pack. Pack whatever means something to you, Austin said. Anything you do not want to leave behind. I will come back here at sunset with a horse for you. Be ready. After Austin left, Rose moved through the house in a daze, gathering her few possessions. She had a dress that had been her mother's, a handful of letters her father had written to her mother during their courtship, a silver hairbrush that was the only valuable thing she owned. Everything fit into a single worn carpet bag. She changed into her best dress, which was not very fine, but at least did not have any patches or stains, and she braided her dark hair carefully. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the Colorado sky in shades of orange and pink, Rose stood at the window and watched for Austin. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and she kept expecting her uncle to appear suddenly, to somehow know what she was planning and stop her. but the road remained empty except for the usual traffic of townsfolk going about their business. Then she saw him, riding toward the house on his sturdy bay gelding with a pretty chestnut mare on a lead rope beside him. Rose grabbed her bag and slipped out the back door, moving as quickly as she dared. She did not leave a note. There was nothing she wanted to say to her uncle that he would care to hear. "You ready?" Austin asked as she approached, and when she nodded, he dismounted and helped her up onto the chestnut mare. The horse shifted beneath her, but Rose had grown up around horses and knew how to sit a saddle, even if her uncle had not let her ride much in recent years. They rode out of Palisade as the last light faded from the sky, taking the road west toward Grand Junction. Austin set a steady pace, not so fast that it would tire the horses, but fast enough that they would put good distance between themselves and Rose's uncle before he returned home. They rode in silence for the first few miles, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Rose spoke. "What if this is a mistake?" Austin glanced at her, his face barely visible in the darkness. "Having second thoughts?" "Not about leaving," Rose said quickly. "Never about that, but about dragging you into my problems. My uncle is not a forgiving man. He will come after us. He will make trouble." "Let him try," Austin said, with a calmness that Rose found both reassuring and alarming. "I am not afraid of Benjamin Miller." "Maybe you should be," Rose said. "He fights dirty. He has no honor." "Then I will be careful," Austin replied. "But Rose, I need you to understand something. I did not offer to marry you just to rescue you. I offered because when I looked at you yesterday in town, I saw someone who reminded me of myself. Someone alone, someone surviving, someone stronger than they realize. I have been drifting for years with no real purpose, just working and moving on and working someplace else. Maybe it is time I stopped drifting. Maybe we can build something together, something good and solid." Rose felt warmth spread through her chest despite the cool night air. "You really mean that?" "I do not say things I do not mean," Austin said. "That is a promise you can count on. I will always be honest with you, Rose, even when the truth is hard." They reached Grand Junction well after midnight, and Austin led them to a small boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Calloway, who was known for being discreet and asking few questions. He rented 2 separate rooms, which surprised Rose until he explained. "We are not married yet," he said simply. "I know we are planning to marry tomorrow, but until we do, I will not compromise your honor or make you uncomfortable." Rose had never met a man like Austin Vance, and with each passing hour she was more grateful that he had walked into that general store at exactly the right moment. She slept fitfully that night, her dreams full of her uncle's angry face and the sound of his fists hitting flesh. But when she woke to sunlight streaming through the window, she felt something she had not felt in years: genuine hope. Austin was waiting for her downstairs, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. He had even bought her a small bouquet of wildflowers from a girl selling them on the street corner. "For the bride," he said with a shy smile that made him look younger than his 24 years. The circuit preacher was a round man with kind eyes who asked them a few questions about their situation, but seemed satisfied with Austin's straightforward answers. Yes, they were both of age. No, there were no legal impediments to their marriage. Yes, they understood this was a binding commitment. Within the hour, Rose Miller became Rose Vance, and when Austin kissed her gently after the preacher pronounced them married, she felt tears slip down her cheeks for the second time in as many days. "We should head back to Palisade," Austin said as they left the small church. "I need to return to work, and you need to meet the foreman and his wife at the ranch. Plus, running away makes it look like we did something wrong. We did not. We got married, which is perfectly legal and proper." Rose nodded, though the thought of facing her uncle made her stomach churn with anxiety. "What if he tries to hurt you?" "Then I will defend myself," Austin said calmly. "But I think once he realizes you are legally married and under my protection, he will back down. Men like him are bullies, and bullies usually fold when someone stands up to them properly." They rode back to Palisade that afternoon, arriving just as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western mesas. Austin took Rose directly to the Double Creek Ranch, where he had already spoken to his foreman, a gruff but fair man named Tom Peterson, about the possibility of hiring additional help for Tom's wife, Sarah. Sarah Peterson was a sturdy woman in her late 50s with gray streaked blonde hair and a no-nonsense manner that Rose immediately appreciated. She looked Rose up and down, taking in the fading bruise on her face and the way she held herself, and something shifted in her expression. "Tom told me you might be coming," Sarah said. "Said you needed work and a place to stay. Did not mention you were married to Austin now." "It is a recent development," Austin admitted. "We got married yesterday in Grand Junction. Rose needs somewhere safe to stay and work to do, and I know you have been saying you could use help with the cooking and cleaning for the hands." Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied them both. "This have anything to do with Benjamin Miller?" Austin and Rose exchanged glances. "Yes, madam," Austin said. "He was mistreating Rose. I could not stand by and let it continue." "So you married her," Sarah said, and there was approval in her voice now. "That took guts, boy. Miller is not going to take this lying down." "I know," Austin said, "but Rose is my wife now, and I will protect her." Sarah nodded slowly. "All right then. Rose, you can stay in the small cabin behind the main house. It is not much, but it is clean and private. You will help me with cooking for the ranch hands 3 meals a day and general cleaning around the place. I will pay you $2 a week plus room and board. Austin, you will continue bunking with the other hands until you and Rose figure out your living situation properly. That sound fair?" "More than fair," Rose said, finding her voice. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson." "Call me Sarah," the older woman said, "and welcome to Double Creek. We take care of our own here, and you are one of us now." For the next few days, Rose threw herself into her new work with an energy born of relief and gratitude. She woke before dawn to help Sarah prepare breakfast for the dozen ranch hands who worked the Double Creek spread. She scrubbed and cleaned and mended, and she fell into bed each night exhausted but satisfied. The small cabin Sarah had given her was indeed simple, just one room with a bed, a table, a chair, and a small stove. But it was hers, and she could lock the door from the inside and no one would hurt her there. Austin came by each evening after his work was done, always polite and proper, sitting outside on the porch step to talk with her about their days. He told her about the horses he was training and the fence lines he was mending, and she told him about learning Sarah's recipes and getting to know the other people on the ranch. They were still strangers in many ways, learning each other's rhythms and preferences, but there was a gentleness between them that Rose had never experienced before. On the 4th day after their return to Palisade, Benjamin Miller came to the ranch. Rose was in the kitchen of the main house, kneading bread dough, when she heard his voice outside bellowing for her. Her hands froze, and her face went white. All the terror of the past 3 years flooding back in an instant. Sarah, who was stirring a pot of stew, immediately moved to stand beside her. "You stay here," Sarah commanded. "I will deal with him." But before Sarah could reach the door, Austin appeared, having heard the commotion from where he had been working in the barn. He strode past the house toward where Benjamin Miller sat on his wagon, his face purple with rage. "Where is my niece?" Benjamin demanded. "I know she is here. I want her back right now." "Rose is not your niece anymore," Austin said, his voice carrying clearly back to where Rose stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. "She is my wife. We were married 4 days ago by a circuit preacher in Grand Junction, all legal and proper." Benjamin's face contorted with fury. "You had no right. She belongs to me. I took her in when her parents died. I fed her and clothed her and kept a roof over her head. And this is how she repays me? By running off with some drifter cowboy?" "You beat her," Austin said flatly. "You terrorized her. You made her afraid to speak freely in her own home. That is not family, that is abuse, and I will not let it continue." "I disciplined her when she needed it," Benjamin snarled. "A man has the right to keep order in his household." "She is not in your household anymore," Austin said, and his hand rested on his belt near his gun, a subtle but clear warning. "She is in mine, and in my household we do not solve problems with violence. Now I am going to ask you politely to leave this property and not come back." Benjamin's eyes were wild, and for a moment Rose thought he might actually try to fight Austin right there. But Tom Peterson had appeared from the ranch office along with several of the other ranch hands, and the sight of so many witnesses made Benjamin think twice. "This is not over," Benjamin spat. "I will make you regret this, both of you. You stole from me, and I will see that you pay for it." "I stole nothing," Austin said. "Rose came with me of her own free will, as is her right as an adult woman. You have no legal claim on her. Now leave before I have Tom ride into town and fetch the sheriff for trespassing." Benjamin jerked his reins, turning his wagon around with enough force to make his horses snort in protest, and drove away in a cloud of dust. Austin stood watching until the wagon was out of sight, then turned and walked back to the house, where Rose still stood in the doorway, shaking. "It is all right," Austin said softly as he approached her. "He is gone." "He meant what he said," Rose whispered. "He will try to get revenge. He will find some way to hurt us." "Then we will deal with it when it comes," Austin said. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement so she could pull away if she wanted, and when she did not, he took her hand gently. "You are safe here, Rose. I promise you." That night, Austin asked if he could sit inside the cabin with her rather than on the porch, and Rose agreed. They sat at the small table, a single lantern casting soft light between them, and talked more deeply than they had before. Austin told her about his childhood in Montana, about his parents and their small ranch that he had loved and lost. Rose told him about her parents, about how her father had been a kind man who never raised his voice, and how her mother had sung while she worked. "I miss them every day," Rose said quietly. "Sometimes I wonder what they would think of the choices I have made." "I think they would be proud of you for surviving," Austin said, "and I think they would be grateful that you got away from your uncle before he did worse than bruises." Rose looked at him in the lamplight. This man who had married her to save her, and felt something shift in her chest. It was too soon to call it love, but it was the beginning of something, a seed planted in fertile soil. "Thank you," she said. "I do not think I have properly thanked you for what you did, for what you are doing." "You do not need to thank me," Austin said. "I made a choice too, Rose, and I stand by it." Over the following weeks, Rose and Austin settled into a new rhythm. She continued to work alongside Sarah, learning not just cooking and cleaning, but also how to manage a household budget, how to preserve food for winter, how to make medicine from herbs that grew wild on the prairie. Sarah became something of a mother figure to Rose, filling a void that had been empty since her own mother's death. Austin worked hard during the day, but always made time in the evening to be with Rose. Sometimes they would walk together around the ranch property, and he would point out constellations in the vast Colorado sky. Sometimes they would sit in her cabin, and he would read aloud from a book of poetry he had carried with him since his mother's death. Sometimes they would simply talk, sharing stories and dreams and fears. One evening, about 6 weeks after their marriage, Austin brought up something that had clearly been on his mind. "Rose, I have been thinking. This arrangement we have, with me in the bunkhouse and you in the cabin, it works, but it is not really a marriage, is it? I mean, it is legally, but not in practice." Rose felt her cheeks warm. They had not discussed the physical side of marriage since their wedding day, and she had been grateful for Austin's patience and respect. But she had also begun to wonder what it would be like to truly be his wife in every sense. "What are you saying?" she asked carefully. "I'm saying that I would like for us to be a real married couple, if you are ready for that," Austin said. "Not because I feel entitled to it, but because somewhere along the way, Rose, I started falling in love with you. The way you hum when you are kneading bread, the way you laugh at my terrible jokes, the way you are not afraid to tell me when you disagree with me about something. I love that you are finding yourself again, becoming more confident and bold. And I would like to build a real life with you if you want that too." Rose's heart was pounding, but not from fear this time. "I have been falling in love with you too," she admitted. "I did not expect it to happen, but it did. You are nothing like what I thought a man would be, Austin. You are kind and patient, and you make me feel safe. And yes, I want to be your wife in every way. I am ready." Austin stood and moved around the table, and when he took her hands and pulled her gently to her feet, Rose went willingly. His kiss was soft at first, questioning, and when she responded by wrapping her arms around his neck, it deepened into something more passionate. That night, Rose Vance truly became Austin Vance's wife, and she discovered that physical love could be tender and sweet rather than something to be feared. The next morning, Austin moved his belongings from the bunkhouse to Rose's cabin, and they began their married life in earnest. Tom and Sarah were supportive, giving them space to be newlyweds while still expecting them both to pull their weight with ranch work. The other hands teased Austin good-naturedly about being a married man now, but it was clear they all respected him and had accepted Rose as part of the ranch family. Benjamin Miller did not give up easily. He spread rumors in town that Austin had kidnapped Rose and forced her into marriage, but no one who saw the couple together believed it. He tried to claim that Rose had stolen money from him before she left, but when the sheriff investigated and found no evidence, that accusation fell flat too. He even attempted to have the marriage annulled on the grounds that Rose had not been of sound mind when she agreed to it, but the judge laughed him out of court. Finally, frustrated and furious, Benjamin made a mistake. He came to the ranch late one night drunk and belligerent with a shotgun in his hands. He was shouting for Rose to come out, threatening to burn down the cabin if she did not return with him. Austin heard the commotion and came out of the cabin with his own rifle, and the two men faced each other in the moonlight. "Put the gun down, Benjamin," Austin said quietly. "You are drunk and you are not thinking straight. Do not do something you cannot take back." "She belongs to me," Benjamin slurred. "My brother's daughter. My responsibility, my property." "She is a human being, not property," Austin said, his voice hardening. "And she is my wife. You have no claim on her, legal or otherwise. Now put down the gun and leave before someone gets hurt." But Benjamin raised the shotgun, and everything happened very quickly after that. Austin fired first, aiming for Benjamin's shoulder to disarm rather than kill, but Benjamin stumbled as he fell and hit his head hard on a rock. By the time Tom Peterson and several hands reached the scene, Benjamin Miller was unconscious and bleeding from both the gunshot wound and the head injury. They brought a doctor from town, and Benjamin survived. But the incident changed everything. The sheriff, who had investigated all of Benjamin's previous claims and found them baseless, arrested him for attempted murder when he woke up. Benjamin was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and his small homestead was sold to pay his legal debts. Rose would never have to fear him again. In the months that followed, Rose and Austin grew even closer. They talked about their future, about what they wanted to build together. Austin had been saving his wages for years with no real purpose, and now he had a goal: to buy a small piece of land and start their own ranch. Rose supported the dream wholeheartedly, and she began saving her wages too. Sarah taught Rose everything she knew about ranching, not just the domestic side, but the business side too. Rose learned to keep accounts, to assess livestock quality, to understand market prices and seasonal patterns. Austin was impressed by how quickly she learned and how much she had to offer beyond just being a good cook and housekeeper. 2 years after their marriage, Austin and Rose Vance purchased 40 acres of good grazing land about 5 miles from the Double Creek Ranch. It was not much, but it was theirs. And they built a small ranch house together with help from their friends. They bought a few head of cattle and some horses, and they worked from sunup to sundown to build their dream. Their first year was hard, full of setbacks and challenges, but they faced everything together. When a late spring blizzard killed 3 of their calves, they grieved together and then worked to save the rest. When drought threatened their water supply, they dug a new well together. When Austin broke his arm in a riding accident, Rose managed the ranch alone for 6 weeks and proved she was just as capable as any man. In the spring of 1886, Rose discovered she was pregnant. She told Austin one evening as they sat on the porch of their ranch house watching the sunset paint the mesas in shades of gold and crimson. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply, and watched his face transform with joy. "A baby," Austin repeated, his voice full of wonder. He pulled her close, one hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. Our baby, Rose, I am so happy I could burst. Me too, Rose said, and she realized it was true. 5 years ago, she could never have imagined feeling this kind of happiness, this sense of safety and love and belonging. I hope I will be a good mother. You will be the best mother, Austin said firmly. You will teach our child to be strong and kind and brave, just like you are. Their son was born in January of 1887, a healthy baby boy with his father's amber eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Samuel after Austin's father, and he became the center of their world. Rose proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving, but also firm when she needed to be. Austin was a devoted father who would come in from working the ranch to spend time with his son, singing to him and telling him stories. As Samuel grew, the Vance ranch grew too. They acquired more land, more cattle, and eventually hired a few hands of their own to help with the work. Rose managed the household and the finances, while Austin oversaw the day-to-day operations, and they made all major decisions together as equal partners. 3 years after Samuel was born, Rose had another child, a daughter they named Clara after Rose's mother. She had Rose's dark hair and Austin's strong spirit, and from the moment she could walk, she was following her father around the ranch, insisting on helping with everything. 2 years later came another son, James, who was quieter and more thoughtful than his siblings, but no less loved. Benjamin Miller was released from prison after serving his full 5-year sentence, but he never returned to Palisade. Word filtered back that he had moved to Wyoming and taken work as a ranch hand, his spirit apparently broken by his time in prison. Rose felt neither satisfaction nor sympathy at the news. She had moved so far beyond that chapter of her life that her uncle felt like a character from someone else's story. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons, of planting and harvest, of births and celebrations. Rose and Austin's ranch became known throughout the region for the quality of their livestock and the fairness of their dealings. More importantly, it became known as a place where people were treated with dignity and respect, where no one was afraid to speak their mind or make a mistake. Rose never forgot what it felt like to live in fear, and she used that memory to make sure no one on their ranch ever felt that way. She was especially kind to the women who came through, wives of ranch hands or travelers passing through, and more than once she provided refuge to a woman escaping a violent situation, just as Austin had once provided refuge to her. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin took Rose on a trip to Denver, their first real vacation since they had married. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate at fancy restaurants, and spent hours just walking the city streets hand in hand. One evening, as they sat in their hotel room watching the city lights twinkle below them, Austin pulled out a small jewelry box. I never got you a proper wedding ring, he said, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. I know it is not much, but I wanted you to have something that showed the world you are my wife, and I am proud of that fact. Rose's eyes filled with tears as she held out her hand and let Austin slip the ring onto her finger. It is perfect, she said, just like you are perfect for me. Not perfect, Austin said with a smile, but trying my best to be the husband you deserve. You already are, Rose said, and she kissed him with all the love she felt. 10 years of love built on trust and respect and partnership. They returned to their ranch and their children, and life continued in its wonderful, ordinary way. Samuel grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Clara became a skilled rider who could rope a steer as well as any cowboy. James discovered a love of books and learning, and his parents scraped together the money to send him to school in Grand Junction during the winters. When Rose was 35 years old, she became pregnant one more time, a surprise baby that made her and Austin laugh at the unexpected blessing. This child was another son, whom they named Daniel, and he was the baby of the family, doted on by his older siblings and parents alike. By the time Rose and Austin celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1907, they were grandparents. Samuel had married a sweet young woman from town named Elizabeth, and they had given Rose and Austin 3 grandchildren. Clara had shocked everyone by becoming a teacher and remaining unmarried, happy with her independence and her work. James had gone to college and become a lawyer, settling in Denver, but visiting often. Daniel was still at home, 17 years old, and working the ranch alongside his aging father. The ranch that had started as 40 acres was now over 200, a successful operation that provided a good living for the Vance family and employment for a dozen men. Rose and Austin had achieved everything they had dreamed of and more, but neither of them ever forgot where they had started. One warm summer evening, as they sat on the porch of their ranch house watching the sunset, Rose leaned her head on Austin's shoulder and thought about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. She thought about the terrified girl she had been at 20, bruised and broken and trapped. She thought about the cowboy who had walked into a general store and changed her life forever. "What are you thinking about?" Austin asked, his arm coming around her shoulders. "I'm thinking about that day in town when you told my uncle to stop," Rose said. "Do you remember?" "I remember everything about that day," Austin said. "I remember seeing you trying to make yourself invisible, and I remember thinking that no one should have to live that way." "You told me I could answer however I wanted," Rose said. "That there would be no consequences, no judgment. That was the moment I started to believe that maybe life could be different." "And is it?" Austin asked. "Different than you imagined?" "Better," Rose said simply. "So much better. You gave me freedom, Austin. Not just freedom from my uncle, but freedom to be myself, to make mistakes, to grow and learn and become who I was meant to be. You gave me a life full of love." "We gave each other a life full of love," Austin corrected gently. "You saved me just as much as I saved you, Rose. Before I met you, I was just drifting, existing but not really living. You gave me purpose and family and a reason to build something lasting." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sky turned from orange to pink to purple. In the distance, they could hear Daniel calling the horses in for the evening, his voice strong and sure. Closer by, they could hear Samuel's children playing in the yard, their laughter bright and joyful. "We did good, did not we?" Rose said. "With our life, with our children, with everything." "We did better than good," Austin said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "We built something beautiful." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Rose thought about all the women she had helped over the years, women who had been in similar situations to her own. She thought about the refuge she and Austin had provided, the second chances they had offered, the way their ranch had become known as a safe place. She thought about her children, all of them strong and confident and kind, knowing they were loved unconditionally. The years continued to pass, bringing more changes and challenges. Austin developed arthritis in his hands, making it harder for him to do the detailed work he once did easily, but he adapted and found new ways to contribute. Rose's eyesight began to fail, but she learned to work by touch and memory. They grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. When Rose was 50 years old, they threw a huge party for their 30th wedding anniversary. Friends and family came from all over Colorado and beyond to celebrate with them. There were 3 generations present, including 5 grandchildren now, and the party lasted well into the night with music and dancing and storytelling. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had gone home or retired to the barn where they were bedding down for the night, Rose and Austin found themselves alone on the porch again. They were tired but happy, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not walked into that store that day?" Austin asked. "I try not to," Rose admitted, "but sometimes I think about it, and it terrifies me. I do not know if I would have survived much longer under my uncle's roof. He was getting meaner, more violent. I think eventually he would have killed me, either on purpose or by accident." "I am glad I was there," Austin said quietly. "I am glad I had the courage to speak up." "Me too," Rose said. She took his hand, feeling the familiar calluses and the wedding band that matched her own. You know what the best part is? It is not just that you saved my life that day. It is that every day since then, you have chosen me. You have chosen us. That is what real love is, I think. The daily choice to stay, to work through problems, to build something together, even when it is hard. You are absolutely right, Austin said, and I would choose you every single day, Rose Vance, in this life and whatever comes after. They sat together until the moon rose high in the sky, holding hands and remembering all the years behind them, while still looking forward to whatever time they had left. Their love story had started with violence and fear, but it had transformed into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of choosing kindness over cruelty, partnership over domination, love over control. In the years that followed, Rose and Austin became the patriarch and matriarch of a growing family. More grandchildren arrived, and eventually great-grandchildren too. The ranch continued to prosper under Samuel's management, with Daniel working alongside his older brother to keep things running smoothly. Clara eventually did marry, a widower with 2 children of his own, who appreciated her independence and strength. James brought his own family back from Denver, deciding that city life was not for him after all. Rose passed away in her sleep at the age of 68, with Austin holding her hand. It was peaceful, which was fitting for a woman who had fought so hard to find peace in her life. Her funeral was attended by over 100 people, all of them touched by her kindness and generosity over the years. Austin spoke at the service, his voice steady despite his grief, and told the story of how they met and what she had meant to him. Rose was the bravest person I ever knew, he said. She survived things that would have broken most people, and she came out the other side with her capacity for love intact. She taught me what it means to be strong, to be kind, to be a partner. She gave me everything that matters in this world, and I will love her until my last breath. Austin lived for 3 more years after Rose's death, long enough to see his family well established and thriving. He spent his final years telling stories to his great-grandchildren about their great-grandmother, making sure they knew what an extraordinary woman she had been. He told them about the courage it took for her to say yes to a stranger's proposal, about the hard work she put into building their ranch, about her generous heart that was always open to helping others. When Austin finally passed away at the age of 71, he was buried beside Rose on a hill overlooking their ranch, under 2 cottonwood trees they had planted together 40 years earlier. The headstones were simple, just their names and dates, but beneath Austin's name was carved a single line. He gave her freedom, she gave him purpose. Together they built a legacy of love. The ranch stayed in the Vance family for generations, each new generation learning the story of Austin and Rose and the values they had lived by. The small cabin where they had first lived together was preserved, and eventually turned into a sort of family museum, filled with photographs and mementos from their life together. The story of how they met, how Austin had stood up to Benjamin Miller and offered Rose a chance at a different life, became family legend. But more than the stories or the physical legacy, what Austin and Rose left behind was a different way of treating people. Every person who worked on the Vance Ranch knew they would be treated with dignity and respect. Every woman who needed help knew she could find refuge there. Every child who grew up in the Vance family learned that love was about partnership, about respect, about the daily choice to be kind even when anger might be easier. The little town of Palisade, Colorado grew and changed over the decades, eventually becoming a popular destination for tourists drawn to the beauty of the Colorado landscape. But old-timers still remembered the Vances and would point out the ranch to visitors, telling the story of the cowboy and the woman he saved, and how their love had become legendary in these parts. And on warm summer evenings when the wind blew just right across the mesas and the sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, some people claimed they could still feel the love that Austin and Rose Vance had shared, lingering in the land they had worked so hard to build into something beautiful. It was a love story that had started with fear and pain, but had been transformed into something lasting and true, a reminder that even in the harshest of environments, kindness and courage could create something extraordinary. The legacy of those words Austin spoke so long ago, "Answer however you want here," echoed through the generations. They became a family motto of sorts, a reminder that in the Vance household, honesty was valued over perfection, truth over fear, and that everyone deserved the freedom to be themselves without punishment. It was a simple phrase, but it had changed Rose's life and through her had changed the lives of countless others. In the end, that was perhaps the greatest legacy of all. Not the land or the cattle or the successful ranch, but the idea that love should be safe, that partnerships should be equal, and that everyone deserves the chance to answer however they want without fear of violence or retribution. Austin and Rose Vance had lived those values every day of their marriage, and in doing so, they had created ripples that spread far beyond their own lives, touching everyone who knew them and everyone who came after. Their story was one of transformation, of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and chose to build something beautiful together. It was a story of the Wild West, of hard work and harder times, but ultimately it was a love story, pure and simple, and like all the best love stories, it ended not with tragedy, but with fulfillment, with two people who had found in each other everything they needed to be whole, who had created a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone.